Welcome to Business Model Hackers, the podcast where we unravel the complexities of business strategy and management tools. Sam Schreim is here with us, a former top-tier management consultant who traded the security of a very lucrative career for the dynamic world of entrepreneurship. Now, this podcast is part of that journey, and I want to mention that, you should know Sam brings a wealth of experience, right? Having advised everyone from Fortune 500 executives, ambitious startups, even extending his expertise to governments and nonprofits and strategic and management roles. So gear up, because we're about to dissect some concepts that I know you're going to love. Sam, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Philip?
I'm feeling great, man. I have a few questions about 8D problem solving that I have here on my notes. This is going to be interesting. I wish it were simpler, but could you just give us an overview of the 8D problem solving process and its origins in business management settings?
Right. I mean, just a quick intro if you want on this particular episodes. I think if we're going to talk about the 8D, which actually it's called the 8-discipline problem solving process, it's not quite a rule of thumb or a heuristic kind of tool like the other episodes, right? Most of the episodes that we have these tools used almost like a heuristic or a rule of thumb, as they get into the more complex stuff. So that's to kind of like do checks and balances and see if they're on the right track. This one is really a more detailed or more in-depth kind of tool that if you want to deploy this, it's not a heuristic thing. It's a full, an all-out deployment, right? That you have to go. It's not as simple. It takes discipline. It's a disciplined approach, right? It requires some investments and maybe some experts to come in and help you implement. But it's important you know that this is a way problem solving and you need to be aware of. The idea here is it's a systematic, team-oriented approach that's used to address and solve complex problems. No, not complex in terms of complexity theory, but complex in terms of, business problems, primarily in the manufacturing, right? And in the engineering. The origin of the 8D methodology can be traced back to the military. So I think it's called 1520. Corrective action and disposition system. I forgot what it was for. Non-conforming material. That's basically was originated in the US. It was developed to address major issues in manufacturing, but it gained widespread recognition later on in the 80s. Ford Motor Company, I think, was in the late 80s that kind of embrace that. The process is basically structured and require a cross-functional team approach to effective implementation, and it's designed to identify, correct, eliminate recurrent problems. So the advantage is that you don't want recurrent problems to recur, right? And this is a lot of the problems that are solved and usually in corporations today or in general. I mean, we always jump to symptoms, solving the symptoms, not identifying the root cause and ensuring that this doesn't recur. But I think this particular tool here helps you solve that if it's implemented rigorously. I think that should be kind of the basis and the background.
Yeah, no. So then can you walk us through some of the 8 disciplines, in terms of the steps and the process, and explain each significance of those steps?
So D1 is establish a team. And that's basically you appoint a cross-functional team with relevant knowledge to basically address the problem. And I think that's the core fundamental. I think as we dive deeper into this, you understand why that's important. As I read through these, you're going to see that they're pretty logic, right? But unfortunately, as logic as these are, when we jump to solving problems, we never follow this. This is why it's been written down in a way like problem description, right? Define the problem. People may think defining the problem is a simple thing, but really it isn't. Clearly describing the problem is understanding what questions to ask in order to identify the problem. And that's not an easy task. People think it's easy. I know, problem description, I know the problem. And most of the time, if you read problems, you'll see that people are describing symptoms and not problem. The third one is containment plan. Okay, that is creating an internal plan to minimize the current and future issues. Okay, until the root cause are addressed. I think that's the core. I mean, to me, if you were to ask me, this is the core of the benefits or the advantages of this, right? D3 and D4 is about the root cause analysis, right? So you need to identify a D4 is where you conduct the analysis, all the potential effects that could be causing, right? So whatever you use for that, right? You could use the 5 whys, which we had an episode on, a fishbone diagram or whatever. right? If you want to apply the hack here, you want to look into linear and nonlinear situation and try to look at, you can, trace it back that way. Because if it's a nonlinear thing, you may not be able to really pinpoint exactly the issue. And then identify, develop a fix plan, right? Determine like the actual corrective action in order to kill that root cause, right? And then, assign the owners, because the team is core, because you're going to give owners to go ahead and fix the problem. And then D6 is implementing the fixes, and D7 is preventing recurrence. So you look for enhancement. So after you implement the fix, it's almost like, what I like about that one is it's almost like having the minimal viable solution in there. So you put it in there and you test and you see, and you keep improving until you get it, error proof. And then D8 is basically congratulate the team, recognize team recognition. I mean, people tend to ignore that, but recognition in this team effort is important. And not only that, actually you want to be sharing and just learning across the organization and monitor improvements that are achieved.
But how versatile is the AP method? Like, can you put it into any business setting or sector, or is it only useful for certain sectors?
No, I think it is. I can't give you examples, right? Because I know the Ford case. I can't give you examples where this has been done. To me, I mean, again, from a business model hacker's perspective, you can look at this as how we would actually address the problem, except we have an additional layer to that where we split the root cause analysis into the linearity and nonlinearity, right? And then when we address the fix, we also have the linearity and nonlinearity aspects. We're here not distinguishing among that. But that said, yes, it is applicable across, because as we went through the steps, you can see that they're very generic. There isn't anything like extraordinary out there. This is how you really need to solve the problem. Now, you don't always need a team, but you need an owner, right? So if if the problem isn't big enough and doesn't necessarily need a team, you don't need a full team, right? But usually in manufacturing and in engineering, you do need a team to solve this, right? Because it's usually not an easy feat. But you can do that in manufacturing. You could do it in healthcare, right? For example, you could do it for addressing safety issues, okay, for patients. You can improve treatment processes. You got all these personalized treatments, right? This is not something that's, used to be there before. So those personalized treatments can follow this process, right? You can do it in operations and health. You can do it in retail and consumer services. For example, you can utilize it to address customer service issues or supply chain. Supply chain is a big aspect of, where this can be implemented, or inventory management. You can also look into finance and banking. Okay, like it could be a tool for solving regulatory compliance issues, or maybe operational bottlenecks. So similar, because you have operations in finance and banking, similar, not, administrative operations, but they're operations nonetheless. So I see it applicable other than manufacturing and engineering everywhere. I don't see why not.
How does AD differ from other business methodologies like Six Sigma or Lean?
Well, I mean, the scope of AD's focus on addressing specific problems, okay? It's more targeted versus Six Sigma and Lean, which take like a broader view on things, right? Like there is the scope, on this, then you have also the team composition. AD utilizes cross-functional teams. They tailor to that particular problem, right? Rather than having a dedicated, for example, quality expert. You also have the statistical orientation, like in Six Sigma, unlike in Six Sigma, where AD doesn't have explicitly emphasized statistical tools for root cause analysis, and I think that's a good thing, because in Six Sigma, everything is fit into that, Gaussian normal. So by default, Six Sigma is a linear solution. AD keeps it open, which opens the door for nonlinearity. And I think the implementation focus is another one. Like the AD structure ensures like a disciplined execution fixes, right? And then they have the recurrence prevention. The Lean and Six Sigma focus are more like on analysis and long-term refinement. Those are the main differences. I think, you're going to also consider like, Six Sigma and Lean driving gradual enhancements as opposed to having a rigorous structured methodology for diagnosing and solving problems. Think about it as a complementing, right? So if you really have, it doesn't mean like if you have Six and Lean in place, it doesn't mean like you have to scrap them, right? And just be careful that Six Sigma is is a linear thing, right? Lean by all means, but you can complement them with the AD, so it's not really a replacement. So think about it that way.
Now, can you think back to any examples where AD problem solving was able to solve a recurring issue in a business or things like that?
Well, I think the obvious example is Ford, right? Because they're like they adopted the AD problem solving, I think, and a way to improve their quality, right? I don't know if you know about the 80s. The U.S. automobile industry suffered big time from quality issues, and the Japanese were like overtook the market. So they use this systematically, I think, to identify and correct and eliminate recurring problem in the manufacturing process. I think the outcome was from the case studies that I've seen in the literature that product quality it really improved as a result. I mean, improved. I didn't say they became perfect. They didn't become Toyota standard, right? But they did improve.
And does this have a lot to do with sort of team composition and how effective AT problem solving is?
Yes, I mean, the importance of teams in this case is that the composition of team is very, very important in the AD, where you need to have a cross-functional perspective, right? So you need to bring stakeholders from different departments, right? You also need to have subject matter expertise. If you remember the ADs, first one is assemble the team, but I didn't get into the details of the team. But then you really need to bring in multiple lenses. People need to look at root cause analysis from the different domains, right? Because you don't know what the root cause is. It could be anything. That's why the cross-functional expertise and the subject matter expertise is of utmost importance. You need authority to implement changes, because sometimes the solutions or the fixes are not very popular. God knows I had my shares of proposing solutions that were resisted and never came to bear because of the resistance to change. Even the authority or the leaders that retained us to propose these changes oppose them. I mean, there has to be authority to go ahead and implement these, overcoming resistance to change, right? It's important that you have support of the upper leadership, of the executive leadership, implementing this process. And when especially, it depends on the size of the problem, right? If it's a major problem, if it's like the Ford case here, where they're looking at quality, that was fundamental to the existing of, the raison d'etre of the entire industry, not only the company Ford, but in that case, they really needed to implement drastic changes that probably weren't popular.
And so then when we're talking about continuous improvement in the scope of AD, how does the AD methodology contribute to a culture of continuous improvement within the organization?
This significantly, I think, contributes to, as we mentioned earlier when we went through the AD, you saw that there's like the team that's been assigned to do that. If they follow the process, they build into it like continuous improvement, right? So there is a systemic approach to problem solving in this case. First of all, it provides a structured approach, right? Like the very few problem solving techniques out there have a structured approach with A, B, C, D, like that, and in this case. Following a structured approach and knowing that, it's almost like a checklist, going one after the other is one way you could do that, right? The second one is like the root cause analysis thing. That's a crucial part. Being able to identifying the root cause and not just addressing the symptoms. And the third part is like the collaboration, which we spoke about it in teams just now. So this cross-functional collaboration breaks down the silos and encourages everybody to cooperate on the solution. So that's another way. The other is preventative measures. So you have a fix, and you have a preventive mechanism or measure, future orientation. Okay, the later stage of measuring forward-thinking aspects help create the organization culture. Not only solves the current issues, but also proactively works on improving the future performance. Then you have also a data-driven decision-making, right? So this is something that recently, not so much in the 80s, but even in the 80s, they had some of that. Right? So the idea here is that you rely on the evidence to understand and solve the problem, right? So this helps you also get to the root cause of the issue, and so you rely on what you hear. It's actually you rely on actual on making sure that your hypotheses are proven through this data-driven decision making. And then you have, I think, one of the things that it's often ignored is employee engagement and empowerment. By involving employees from the existing organization, can increase the engagement and a sense of ownership. And the implementation it reduces the resistance to change. Lastly, I think the feedback and the adaptation is a core. By validating and measuring the effectiveness, you have this feedback loop going. So that is, I think, one of the core fundamental principles of the continuous improvement.
And then if a business were listening to this and they said, you know what, I think I'm going to adopt this, right? Whether it's an entrepreneur, business, model hacker, someone, what are some initial steps they should be taking and best practices if they're going to actually go for it?
It's important to understand that this method is not for every company. In essence, I think it should be deployed by assessing, your organization's readiness, whether you have the suitability, also the size of the problem, right? So you need to size the problem to understand if you really need to go to that length for solving problems, because sometimes problems are solved much easier than that. If you don't always need to go out of your way and start by, let's apply the 8D things, assign a team. You may also start, from the level down, identify the root cause, and could be easily identified. Then you can assess whether or not you need this AD process, right? For example, let's take some examples. If it's a one-time problem, right? If it's an issue that, let's say, is caused by an isolated system or equipment, it doesn't require deeper investigation, right? You don't need an AT, right? It's a simple fix. Crisis scenario, when confronting urgent critical problems, safety issues or product calls or customer crisis, containment action, things like that would take precedence over a structured protocol because you have crisis on your hand. You're not going to go and say, well, I have this major problem. It's not like a quality issue that, requires a lengthy intervention, right? So this requires an immediate intervention. So an AD process is not necessarily suitable.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, man. I think that wraps up our discussion for today. And again, I can't thank everyone enough for tuning in and listening. Sam, always generously breaking things down for us. I appreciate you. For anybody who's on right now and you haven't followed us on the social channels, please be sure to do that. Help support everything that we're trying to do for all of you here. And make sure that you subscribe by going to businessmodelhackers.com and get on that newsletter so you can go and find yourself getting emails about deeper resources, the kind that go all the way in on the things that you're trying to learn here to make you far more capable of solving problems with less time, less decisions, but making it stronger decisions. So that's what we're doing here. Thank you so much for being part of this journey, and tune in next time.